Hi guys, welcome to this lecture or talk on alveolar lesions. My name is Dr. Arjun. I did my MBBS from FMC Pune. I'll be trying to help you with all the valve-related lesions, and this will be a part of the CVS lecture series available on this platform. So, before starting, I would like to make a very humble request that before dealing with any topic with CVS, you should be very, very clear with cardiac cycle. Okay, like it should be at the back of your hand. If I should ask you anything at what like 0.7 seconds, what's happening in the heart, you should be able to just say it the drop of a hat. Okay, so that with that said, some further readings into this Wiener diagram, like what part of ECG corresponds with what part of JVP and what part of the heart sounds. Okay, this is also very, very helpful. A basic idea about all the heart sounds. Okay, and lastly, of course, JVP is very important, right? So with this said, and I hope that when you start this lecture, you are very thorough with all these things because this is going to help you a lot. Okay, so as this lecture series, let's start with the very basics, okay, of valves. Because now we're dealing with valvular heart diseases, so we should know all the normal things and normal variants, which may seem abnormal but are normal variants. Okay, so we'll just start with relevant anatomy of the valves. Okay, we know that valves can be of two types: bicuspid and tricuspid. Okay, bicuspid means two cusps, tricuspid means three cusps. Okay, so a bicuspid valve is most commonly you will find between
left atrium and left ventricle.
okay, and an abnormal variant is bicuspid aortic valve. We know that aortic valves are tricuspid, right? So this, when the aortic valve is bicuspid, of course it is abnormal. Okay. The most common cardiac anomaly in Turner syndrome is bicuspid aortic valve. This is a very, very important question. It will be asked in some exam or the other. Okay. Now, the second most common cardiac anomaly in Turner syndrome is coarctation of aorta. Yeah, this is also very important. Okay. So most valves in the heart are tricuspid, right? We all know from basic anatomy. Just give you a brief overlook at the valves. So this is a, as you can see, is a this is a coronal section, right? We have taken a anterior posterior section of the body, and now we can see the heart in the coronal section. So this is the right atrial chamber. This is the right ventricular chamber. Okay, so we know that we are looking at a tricuspid valve. So we need to look at the three cusps first. So the cusps are 1, 2, and 3, right? So these cusps are supported by chordae tendineae. Okay, so this is one set, this is the second set, this is the third set. These chordae tendineae are arising from papillary muscles. Of course, you have to give structural support to the valves, right? They can't just be floating mid-air. So you need papillary muscles. So these papillary muscles arise from different parts of the heart. Okay. So the ones arising from the anterior part are called the anterior papillary muscles. Okay. The one from the posterior wall are called the posterior papillary muscles. And there's one cusp that is arising from the septal margin. Okay. So septal papillary muscles. All right. So one peculiar thing is in the anterior papillary muscle, there is one extension of the muscular bit. This this is called the moderator band. Okay, this is a muscular extension from the anterior papillary muscle to the anterior wall. Why is this important to know? That this moderator band houses a branch of the right bundle branch. All right. So if there is an anterior wall ischemia in the right ventricle, then we can expect injuries occurring to this bundle branch, leading to various kinds of arrhythmias. Okay, so that's something you need to keep in mind. Second is bicuspid valve. Okay, this is the left ventricle and this is the left atrium. Of course, these are the two cusps because it's a bicuspid valve. The two tendineae, all right, corresponding tendineae. These are the papillary muscles, okay, arising from the anterior and the posterior wall. Okay, this is the basic anatomy of your valves. This I'm sure that you have read in your cross anatomy of cardiovascular system, but I'll just give you an overview. So when you look at the right atrium, right, so on the medial wall, you will find this fossa ovalis, the margin of which is called limbus fossa ovalis. All right. This is the SVC, that is the superior vena cava. This is the IVC, inferior vena cava, and this is the muscular pectinity. These things are very important. How they arise, okay, from what part, crista terminalis, sulcus terminalis. These things are very important. Please refer to the gross anatomy section of your CBS. Okay, like from what parts are these things arising? Okay, you should know these things. All right, and this is the auricle. And one thing that is very peculiar that you might find here is opening for veni cauda minimi. Okay, so what is this? So what happens is these are also called trapezial veins. These are small veins, okay, and they drain into the left atrium and left ventricle. Okay, so what it does is it's a physiological shunt as the blood passes back to systemic circulation without going to lungs. Right, there's some amount of blood that is being recirculated inside the heart, and it never goes to the lungs. Okay, so it is a physiological shunt. Right, shunt means you're bypassing the lung. Right, the blood's supposed to go to the lung and then come back. So shunt means you're bypassing this whole process. Okay, that's why it's called a shunt. So this is the relevant anatomy. We just delve into the physiology, and this is, guys, very very important. And if you're clear with this, I think valvular heart diseases should be a cakewalk. Okay, this pressure dynamics of the heart. So what we'll do is we'll just look at the pressure volume loops. Okay, it's very interesting also, and it will give you a lot of clarity. Okay, so we'll just look at the normal pressure volume loop and what it suggests, what it signifies, what are the anomalies that we can see, and this in itself can be a question. Okay, from physiology. Okay, so just let's see. This is the y-axis, this is the x-axis. All right, on y-axis we are showing of Hgs. So this is pressure. Okay, pressure of what? Pressure of the left ventricle or any ventricle. Okay, on the x-axis we are showing mLs. So this is volume. So we are showing the amount of blood. All right. So just let me demarcate this normal PV loop. Okay, this right here is the normal PV loop. Right, and these two are the variations that we will discuss subsequently. All right. So this is the starting point. All right. When you start from here, you'll see that this graph is going horizontally forward. So what does this line suggest? This suggests that the volume is increasing, right? Because we are moving ahead in the x-axis. But at the same time, your pressure is constant, right? So what phase of cardiac cycle you can think of where the volume is increasing, but the pressure is not increasing? Of course, that is the filling phase. Okay, the ventricle is receiving the blood. Okay, then we reach here. But now we see that the volume has stopped increasing, but the pressure abruptly rises, right? So what part of the cycle you can correspond this to? That is the isovolumetric contraction, right? And we know from our cardiac cycle knowledge that isovolumetric contraction is preceded by S1. It has to, right? Because once the S1 corresponds with the closure of the mitral valve, so it has to close for it to be isovolumetric. The volume has to remain constant. Nothing goes, nothing comes, right? So all valves have to be closed. So S1 corresponds with your mitral valve closure, right? So that's why I said it's very important to know the cardiac cycle inside out. So this will correspond with S1, right? This is where the S1 occurs. Now we are here, okay? But now you see that this graph is going backwards. What does that backward? Sorry, this is the normal graph. So the graph is going backwards, right? Means the volume is decreasing, right? We are going on the x-axis in this direction. So volume is decreasing. So what does that mean? Why is the volume decreasing? Where is the blood going? The blood is being ejected out of the ventricles, right? So now we reach here. Okay? So here, now we see that now the volume again becomes constant, right? And the pressure drops dramatically. When does this happen? This happens in isovolumetric relaxation, right? And we know from our cardiac cycle knowledge that isovolumetric relaxation is preceded by S2, right? The closure of the tricuspid aortic valves, right? So this is here S2 as mentioned here, and now we are back here. Okay, so this is the entire thing. Now, this is the point where the filling starts, right? And this is where we end up. So this point where the filling ends, it must correspond to what? The end diastolic volume. So this point is the end diastolic volume. And after all doing all this thing, like this, like this, like this, we come here at the end of systole, right? This is the end of systole. And this should correspond with the end systolic volume, right? So always remember this. This point is end systolic volume. This point is end diastolic volume. This point is S1. This point is S2, right? So now, what is this width of this loop? So we know that this is end diastolic volume, this point. Then we subtract minus end systolic volume, right? It will give you stroke volume. This is something we have learned in physiology. EDV minus ESV is SV, right? This is the amount of blood that leaves, and that is the stroke volume, right? Then you can ask, what is this vertical length suggest? This vertical length suggests, of course, the pressure in the left ventricle, right? Left ventricular pressure. And the more the afterload, the more will be the pressure. So it also suggests the afterload. What is afterload? Afterload is the resistance against which the ventricle is pumping the blood. So you can say that systemic vascular resistance is a kind of a marker of afterload. So more is the afterload, the more will be the left ventricular pressure. So this is now your normal PV loop. We'll just try to see a few variations in this. So let's say that there is a sympathetic discharge, which will cause increased catecholamines, right? Like adrenaline, right? So in that, what will happen is, we'll start the filling. We'll come here at the end of isovolumetric contraction. Now, due to this increased catecholamines, it will act as a positive ionotrope, right? What does that mean? That the force of contraction will increase, okay? This, I'm sure you've learned in physiology. Inotropy means increased in the force of contraction. So what will happen is, this will generate a greater power. So increased pressure. So this loop will shift upwards, right? And this thing increases, as you can see, right? Greater force of contraction, greater left ventricular pressure. All right. So now we are here. So when we come back down, we see that the end systolic volume has decreased. It was here first. This is the volume that has decreased, right? So that you can think that positive ionotropy will always lead to decreased end systolic volume, right? As you can see in the graph. Let's see what negative ionotropy does. So it will do the same similar thing. Okay, less force generated. So this graph shifts down. So conversely, the end systolic volume will increase, right? If you are pumping less fiercely, less amount of blood will leave in systole. So at the end of systole, more amount of blood is left behind, right? I hope you understand this logic. All right, that's one thing. There's something called a luciotropy or lucitropy. Okay, what it means is lucitropy gives you the understanding of how is the ventricle behaving while it's getting filled with blood. Okay, so basically it is kind of suggestive of the compliance of the ventricle. All right, so whatever conditions that change the compliance of your ventricle will change the lucitropy. So basically what will happen is, this segment where the volume is increasing, that is the filling phase, right? But the pressure is not increasing. This will change. Okay, so in an abnormal ventricle, when the filling starts, the pressure will slowly start to rise, right? And this is called positive lucitropy. Okay, I'm sure you have done these things in physio also, but it's very beneficial if you revise it here just before the valvular heart lesions. So now what we need to do is, we need to apply this to our valvular heart lesions. Okay, most common mitral stenosis, we all know, we'll come across this later on. So stenosis means the aperture has become smaller. Okay, so the normal flow of blood will, the volume of blood that leaves that aperture will decrease. So what will happen is, in mitral stenosis, the end diastolic volume will, of course, it will decrease. Why? Because the filling is less, no? Less blood is coming to the ventricle, so it decreases the EDV. But the ESV will be normal. The systolic volume, end systolic volume will be, because the ionotropy is normal. There is no sympathetic discharge in this condition. There is no catecholamines being released. So this will be normal. Now this will cause decreased stroke volume. We know that end diastolic volume minus end systolic volume is stroke volume. So if one is decreased, so stroke volume will decrease. This will cause a decrease in aortic pressure, right? Because less blood is going to aorta. Now, this will cause a secondary change in the body. Okay, the body will try to correct itself by increasing the stroke volume. Right? How will it increase the stroke volume? By doing some kind of positive ionotropy. Right? So this will cause a relative decrease in end systolic volume, which we have done. That positive ionotropy causes that. Okay. So what will happen is, this was your normal PV loop, right? But we know that the end diastolic volume has decreased. The end systolic volume has also decreased. So what you will see is that your graph will shift to the left, right? So it can be asked to you as a question, that left shift of PV loop corresponds to mitral stenosis, right? You just take another lesion. this is mitral regurgitation. So blood is coming back into the left atrium. So after systole, more blood is leaving the ventricle. So there will be decreased end systolic volume. Due to this, there will be increased end diastolic volume. This is very important. Why is the EDV increasing? Because the blood that left the ventricle after systole, that blood will come back to the ventricle. Okay, because some blood, just let me show this here. This is your ventricles, right? And this is your aperture. So when systole occurs, some blood leaves in the aorta, but some blood goes back in the atrium. Okay. Now when the next cycle starts, the ventricle will receive its normal quota of normal quota of volume that it receives. Okay, in diastole. But this extra blood that went back, this will also come along with this, right? So that is why the end diastolic volume is increasing, right? I hope it's clear. Very important. Okay. So now we see that both have, like, this has increased, this has decreased, so stroke volume will increase. And the peculiar thing about regurgitant lesions is there will be no true isovolumic phases. So no true isovolumic contraction or no true isovolumic relaxation, because blood is going left ventricle to left atrium. And you'll be surprised to know that even in relaxation, while the heart is relaxing, ventricle is relaxing, the relaxing heart, in the relaxing heart, the pressure of the ventricle is still greater than what pressure is in the left atrium. And that is why even during isovolumetric relaxation, the blood is moving. So there are no true isovolumic phases. So what will happen is, we know that the systolic volume has decreased and systolic volume. EDV has increased. And I told you that since it cannot be isovolumic, so these lines have to be tilted now, right? Because the volume does not remain constant. It changes, right? So this is the graph of, the PV loop of mitral regurgitation. Okay. Let's come to aortic stenosis. The same thing, stenosis means less amount of blood is leaving the ventricle. All right. So it means the stroke volume has decreased. If the stroke volume has decreased, the ESV has to increase. Okay. Right. So end systolic volume has increased, and then the ventricle will receive its quota of ventricular filling. So it will cause increase in end diastolic volume because already extra blood is left behind, and then it receives its normal quota. So increased. And as you can see, end diastolic volume increase, and systolic volume increase, and because the afterload is increased, right? Because the heart is pumping against a higher resistance, so there will be positive inotropy also. So this is the graph for aortic stenosis. I hope it's very, very clear, right? So the graph will shift to the right. So these two, like, pop-up questions: shift to left, mitral stenosis; shift right, aortic stenosis. This should be ingrained in your head. Anybody asks you, you should come up with this. Okay. Same goes for regurgitation of aortic valves also. The end diastolic volume will increase. All right. And there are no true isovolumic phases. So this is the graph. I would request for you to work out these graphs on your own also. Okay. You should be able to draw these graphs without any aid. One last lesion I would like to discuss here is constrictive pericarditis or cardiac tamponade. Okay. So I told you about lucitropy, right? So when the ventricular filling is hampered in the sense the compliance of the ventricle changes. So what will happen is, this is the normal PV loop. All right. So when the filling starts, the pressure will not remain same, and it will start rising slowly. And this is where this lucitropy I talked about earlier. Okay. So now the important takeaway from this thing is that you will not be drawing graphs in the exam, right? They'll ask you about various lesions, what happens to the end systolic volume, what happens to the afterload, and at that time, like, this drawing graphs is not going to work because you have very small amount of time per question. So I'll give you a trick to do this. So if I ask you, tell me a lesion where the afterload is increasing, you will straight away come up with aortic stenosis, right? In aortic stenosis, the afterload is increasing, right? The heart is pumping against a stenosed valve. If I ask you, give me an example of a lesion where preload is decreasing, right? I'm asking preload. Preload is the amount of volume of blood that is being received. Okay. So it will decrease wherever the mitral valve is stenosed, right? Less blood is coming for the heart to pump. So mitral stenosis causes decreased preload. If you remember this, you will be able to solve most questions. Okay. So afterload, it also corresponds to what? If afterload increases, What else will increase? End systolic volume will increase. No? Because less blood is leaving the heart. So ESV is increasing. And as with preload, we can see that our end diastolic volume will increase. Sorry, our end diastolic volume will obviously decrease. It will not increase. I'm so sorry. End diastolic volume will decrease because less filling is occurring, right? So now, you have to remember is, since in aortic stenosis, right, the afterload is increasing, right? So you remember, afterload always decreases except aortic stenosis, right? We remember that, we know that mitral stenosis, the preload will decrease. So we remember, preload always increase except mitral stenosis, right? And you know, if afterload increases, ESV increases. If preload decreases, the EDV also decreases. So now we are in a good position to look at this chart. Okay, I have given you the trick, and I would like you to work out this chart on your own. I'll just give you one example. Okay, let's see MR. Now, afterload. We know that afterload always increases. Sorry, afterload always decreases except aortic stenosis. All right, so it will decrease here. About preload, we said preload always increases except in mitral stenosis. So here it increases. Okay, wherever afterload will decrease and systolic volume will decrease. Wherever preload will increase, EDV will increase. So see, this is how you work out the pressure dynamics in all the valvular regions. Okay, I hope this is very helpful. Okay, so now we have done the relevant physiology also. So we'll just take a look at basic pathology. All right. So generally, we know that our most commonly our valvular lesions are a result of your acute rheumatic fever leading to rheumatic heart diseases. Okay. So we know, I'll just go through the bare basics. Please read this topic from pathology. Okay. Rheumatic heart disease. It is a type 2 hypersensitivity reaction. All right. We know all about this. Molecular mimicry. Right. Please read these things. Very important. All right. The affected age group is 5 to 15 years. All right. And there's a history of group A streptococcus infections. Okay. Basically, the antigens of this organism mimics a lot of our tissue antigens. Okay. Like the ones in the pericardium, endocardium, the valves, and all these things. Okay. So please read this topic in very detail in your pathology. So now these antibodies, they cross-react with all these glycoproteins which are present in joints, cardiac tissue, brain. All right. So whenever there's cardiac involvement, it is called rheumatic heart disease. All right. So generally it is a pancarditis. All right. Very, very important. All three layers can be involved. Okay. But when there is pericarditis, it is called bread and butter pericarditis. Okay. This is very important. Very, very important. It can be asked to you. Okay. So there is a focus or foci of necrosis. Okay. Which is surrounded by plasma cells and lymphocytes and macrophages. This is called your Aschoff body. Okay, just take a brief look. Okay, and around this Aschoff body, there is a presence of ribbon-like patterns of chromatin material. Okay, in a modified macrophage. So, and it is called Anitzkow cell. Okay, so a modified macrophage present inside the Aschoff body is called Anitzkow cell. Okay, the commonest these are very, very important one-liner questions. The commonest location of Aschoff body is myocardium. Always. Okay, remember this. Okay. In endocardium involvement, the commonest valve that is involved is, of course, we know this, mitral valve is the most commonly involved, and the least commonly involved is the pulmonary valve. Okay, these are simple sitter questions. These questions you can't get wrong. Like, what is the most common valve? What is the least common valve? You have to get these correct. Okay, so the complications in acute RHD, that is rheumatic heart disease. There is mitral regurgitation. Okay, generally in chronic RHD, you will see some fibrosis, the narrowing of lumen of the mitral valve, which leads to stenosis. Okay, which is also called fish mouth or buttonhole appearance. It will be something like this. Okay, that's why it's called a fish mouth. Okay, please look at the relevant images in your patho lecture. Okay, So this is the updated criteria for rheumatic heart disease. All right. This is very, very important. Questions will be asked. Okay. And these are covered in your path also and also in the lecture for acute rheumatic fever. All right. So please go through this. I'm not covering it here. So after this is done, we'll just take a brief look at the vegetation that we can see on the cardiac valves. Since we are dealing with valvular pathologies, we'll just take a look. Okay. So cardiac vegetations. Okay. What do we mean by this? We mean by this that if there are bodies present on the valvular cusp, okay, upper side or lower side or along the line of closure, okay, that will of course alter the dynamics of the blood flow. So we need to know what kind of vegetations are found in what kind of diseases. Okay. So let's say rheumatic heart disease. So these vegetations are located along the line of closure. This is very, very important. If the question mentions this, if it's along the line of closure, you straight away start thinking about rheumatic heart disease. All right. These lesions, these vegetations will be small, sterile, firm, and there's no chance of embolization. So rheumatic heart disease does not embolize. All right. Second is Libben-Sachs endocarditis. These all things will be taught to you in path. Okay, I'm just revising. So please get your basic knowledges from pathology. All right. Vegetations involve either side of the valve. Okay. So basically, people make mistake here. They just mark that lower side of the valve. No. Okay. It can be on either side of the valve. Okay. Lower surface is more common. Okay, but it's not the only surface that is involved. And as you can see, upper surface can also be involved. Libben-Sachs endocarditis is seen in patients with SLE. Okay. So basically, LSE is in SLE. That's how you remember. Okay. Infective endocarditis. Okay. In case of acute infective endocarditis, which is caused by Staph aureus, and in case of subacute endocarditis, that is caused by Streptococcus. All right. Vegetations are large, they are friable, they are high chances of embolization. Okay. Ring abscess is also seen. Okay. And the last is Marantic endocarditis. Okay. In this, vegetations are not along the line of closure, but on valve leaflet. Okay. And these are prone to embolization. Marantic is seen in all the endocarditis that is associated with any hypercoagulable state and in pancreatic carcinoma. All right. You can just look at these images and I'll just give you a trick to remember. So embolic, how they'll ask you which one is embolic. So you remember as EMI. Okay. Marantic and infective endocarditis are embolic. Others are not. On the valve leaflet, you will find the ones for rheumatic heart disease and Marantic endocarditis. Even in this, the rheumatic heart disease is along the line of closure and the Marantic one is not along the line of closure. It is on the cusp. The only lesion that is large is infective. All others are small. All right. So that's how you remember. And just as a last slide, for mitral valve prolapse. All right. So basically, we'll cover this in next part of this lecture. That basically there is a degeneration of the valvular material. Okay. It's also called Barlow syndrome. It is called mitral valve prolapse. Most commonly seen in females. All right. And due to this, the valve projection to the left atrium. So what we do is we use a Movat stain. All right, for this staining. And in this stain, you can see the uppermost yellow part, this part. This is representing collagen. The lowermost part, the black part, represents elastin. And the middle part, this is the spongiosa. Like the middle, there is expanded area called the spongiosa due to deposition of proteoglycan. So this is the diseased part, okay, which compromises the consistency of the valve, which leads it to prolapse. Okay. In next part,